This is a real event. For centuries, it has been a whisper, a shadow on the water, a legend sustained by grainy photographs and fleeting glimpses. The mystery of Loch Ness is carved into the very bedrock of the Scottish Highlands, a dark, peat-stained question mark sprawling 23 miles long and descending to depths that defy the sun. We have long believed we were searching for an animal, a relic of a bygone age. We were wrong. The search was not for a creature hiding in the loch. The search was for what the loch was hiding. The story, as we know it, began not with a scientist but with a saint. In the year 565 AD, the Irish monk Columba was said to have encountered a water beast in the river Ness, which flows from the loch. According to his hagiographer, the creature had mauled a local man and was preparing to attack another of Columba's followers when the saint made the sign of the cross and commanded it, "Go no further. Do not touch the man, go back at once." The beast, it is written, fled as if terrified. For over 1,000 years, the story remained a piece of local folklore, a cautionary tale for those who ventured too near the deep, black water. The modern era of the mystery was born of industry. In 1933, the new road was completed along the northern shore of the loch, offering unprecedented, clear views of its surface. That April, a local couple, Aldi and John McKay, were driving home when Mrs. McKay screamed, pointing towards the water. There, she claimed, a colossal creature, black, wet, with water rolling off its back, was tumbling and plunging in the center of the loch. Their story, published in the Inverness Courier by editor Alex Campbell, who coined the term monster, ignited a global sensation. The age of the Loch Ness Monster had begun. What followed was a parade of tantalizing, yet ultimately inconclusive, evidence. In 1934, the world was captivated by the surgeon's photograph. Published in the Daily Mail, it depicted a slender, long neck and head rising gracefully from the water. Attributed to Colonel Robert Kenneth Wilson, a respected London surgeon, the image became the definitive portrait of Nessie, the icon of a prehistoric plesiosaur surviving in the isolated Scottish waters. For 60 years, it was the cornerstone of belief. It was only in 1994 that the world learned it was an elaborate hoax, a toy submarine fitted with a sculpted head, a bitter act of revenge by a big game hunter who had been publicly ridiculed for his own Nessie claims. The revelation was a body blow to believers, yet the mystery did not die. It was as if the photograph, even as a fake, had tapped into a more profound and archetypal fear. It gave a face to the unknown, and even with the mask torn away, the sense of an unknown presence remained. The sightings continued, too numerous and too consistent to be dismissed as mere fantasy. People from all walks of life, policemen, priests, lawyers, and fishermen reported seeing large hunks, powerful weights moving against the current, and long, serpentine necks. The sheer volume of eyewitness testimony became a phenomenon in itself. While many could be explained away as boat wakes, swimming deer, or tricks of the light on the notoriously deceptive water, a stubborn residue of credible, inexplicable sightings remained. Then came the film in 1960, aeronautical engineer Tim Dinsdale, a man who had abandoned his career to dedicate his life to solving the mystery, captured something extraordinary on a 16mm cine camera. From a hillside opposite the loch, he filmed a large, dark hump moving across the surface, leaving a powerful V-shaped wake behind it. At one point, it appeared to submerge and change direction before continuing on its path. Dinsdale sent his film to the Royal Air Force's Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Center for analysis. The verdict was startling. The experts concluded that the object was probably an animate object, measuring between 12 and 16 feet in width and moving at a speed of up to 10 miles per hour. The Dinsdale film remains one of the most compelling pieces of evidence ever gathered, a moving image that resisted all attempts at simple debunking. The pursuit of Nessie then moved from the surface to the unseen depths. The era of sonar had arrived. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, various expeditions from universities and the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau deployed sonar equipment, hoping to ping the creature. They recorded tantalizing but fleeting contacts, large, moving targets that would appear on screen for a moment before vanishing into the acoustic shadows of the loch's steep underwater cliffs and trenches. They heard strange clicks and whistles on hydrophones, sounds not easily attributable to any known aquatic life in the loch. The sonar was painting a picture of something large and elusive, something that seemed to be actively avoiding detection in the crushing, lightless abyss. This culminated in 1987 with Operation Deepscan, the most ambitious and comprehensive sonar sweep of the loch ever attempted. A fleet of 24 boats, each equipped with state-of-the-art sonar, was arranged in a line, an acoustic curtain intended to sweep the loch from one end to the other. Nothing, it was theorized, could escape it. For 2 days, the flotilla moved slowly down the length of the loch. Much of the time, the screens showed nothing but the familiar contours of the bottom and schools of Arctic char and salmon. Then, in the deep water of Hook Castle, it happened. Multiple boats in the flotilla simultaneously registered a massive, unidentified sonar contact. It was, according to the operators, much larger than a fish and not a whale. Darrell Lawrence, the founder of the company that supplied the sonar equipment, was on board and reviewed the data personally. He described it as a large, moving object of unusual size and strength. For a few breathless minutes, the team tracked it. It was deep, nearly 600 feet down. It was moving, and it was huge. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. It either dove to the bottom and settled, becoming indistinguishable from the rocks, or it moved with a sudden burst of speed out of the sonar cone. The team recorded 2 more similar contacts during the sweep, each one large, mobile, and utterly enigmatic. Operation Deepscan ended in a state of profound ambiguity. It had failed to produce a photograph or a body, but it had provided the strongest scientific evidence to date that something of considerable size was indeed living and moving in the black water. In the decades that followed, the mystery endured, but the scientific consensus began to drift towards more mundane explanations. Perhaps it was a misidentified sturgeon, a fish that can grow to enormous sizes and has a prehistoric, armored appearance. Perhaps it was a giant, sterile eel. This latter theory gained significant traction in 2018, when Professor Neil Gemmell of the University of Otago in New Zealand conducted a massive environmental DNA survey of the loch. By sampling water from multiple locations and depths, his team could identify the DNA of every living species in the loch. The results were announced with global fanfare. There was no shark DNA, there was no sturgeon DNA. And most importantly, there was absolutely no reptilian DNA, seemingly closing the book on the plesiosaur hypothesis. What they did find, however, was a very large amount of eel DNA at almost every site. Gemmell concluded that while there was no evidence for a monster, it was plausible that some eels in the loch grew to an exceptional size, and that one of these giant eels might be responsible for the sightings. For the scientific community, this felt like a neat and tidy conclusion. The mystery was solved, it was just an eel. But for those who had studied the history, who has seen the Dinsdale film or read the sonar reports from Operation Deep Scan, it didn't add up. An eel, no matter how large, could not account for the sheer bulk and power described by witnesses and, more importantly, detected by sonar. The case seemed closed, yet the feeling of dissatisfaction lingered. The explanation felt smaller than the mystery itself. That was the state of affairs until late last year. The new expedition, kept under a strict veil of secrecy, arrived at the loch. This was not a group of enthusiastic amateurs or a university on a budget. This was Operation Leviathan, a privately funded initiative by the Cambrian Institute, a shadowy geoceanographic research firm known for its work in deep-sea mineral prospecting for clandestine government contractors. They brought with them technology that made Operation Deep Scan look like a child's fish finder. Their primary tool was not a boat-mounted sonar, but a fleet of 3 autonomous underwater vehicles, or UVs, nicknamed the Hounds. These torpedo-shaped drones were equipped with the latest generation of synthetic aperture sonar. Unlike traditional sonar that sends out a single ping, SAS uses the UV's movement to build a composite image of such stunning resolution it can pick out a shoelace on the seabed from 100 feet away. The plan was to create the first-ever complete, 3-dimensional, high-resolution map of the entire loch basin, every rock, every fissure, every wreck. The official mission brief was geological survey. The unofficial purpose was to end the debate once and for all. For 3 weeks, the Hounds worked tirelessly, crisscrossing the loch in a pre-programmed grid, diving to depths of over 750 feet. Their data streamed back to the mothership, a repurposed North Sea survey vessel named the Street Columba, where technicians watched the loch floor render on their screens in photorealistic detail. They mapped the wreck of a Wellington bomber that crashed in 1940. They found dozens of smaller sunken boats. They traced the Great Caledonian Fault line that runs beneath the loch. But they found no monster. The mood on the ship shifted from excitement to routine boredom. The mystery, it seemed, really was just an eel. The discovery was made on the 23rd day, during what was meant to be the final survey run. Hound 2 was mapping a section of the northern basin, an area known for its precipitous underwater cliffs. The sonar operator on duty, a young technician named Evan Ross, was half asleep, watching the gray, textured landscape scroll by on his monitor. Suddenly, an alert blared. The system had flagged an anomalous return, something that didn't match the geological profile. Ross sat up, his heart quickening. On the screen was a trench. This in itself wasn't unusual. The loch is full of them, but the SAS was rendering the object inside the trench. It was not a rock formation. The texture and density were wrong. It was organic, and it was monolithic. The UV software began to run measurements, the numbers appearing on the side of the screen making Ross's blood run cold. Length, 32.7 meters. Over 107 feet. This was longer than a blue whale, the largest animal known to have ever existed on Earth. It was 3 times the size of the largest sonar contact from Operation Deep Scan. Ross frantically called the project supervisor over. Within minutes, the entire command hub was crowded, people staring in stunned silence at the screen. The object's shape was the most disturbing part. It was not the smooth, streamlined form of a whale or even the serpentine shape of an eel. The high-resolution sonar revealed a complex, segmented body. It was vaguely serpentine, yes, but along its length were multiple pairs of long, articulated appendages. They were not fins, they looked more like the jointed limbs of an arthropod, folded tightly against its body. The head end of the creature was a bulbous, heavily massed shape, from which the sonar detected two long, whip-like protrusions extending forward for several meters. The overall silhouette looked less like a vertebrate and more like a nightmarish chimera of a crustacean in a reptile, an anatomical impossibility from the deepest, most alien trenches of the ocean, or from a time before the dinosaurs. It was lying motionless on the floor of the trench, a place that would later be informally named the Athelred Abyss by the crew. The mission objective changed instantly. The other two hounds were recalled and programmed to converge on Hound 2's position. The plan was to get a multi-angle sonar fix and, if possible, a visual. Hound 1 and Hound 3 were equipped with high-intensity strobes and high-resolution cameras. Cautiously, the three EVs descended back into the abyss. They found the trench. The lead UV, Hound 2, slowed its approach, its powerful lights cutting through the thick, peaty blackness. The water was a maelstrom of suspended sediment, the Loch Ness that makes visibility a matter of inches. They were flying blind, relying entirely on the live sonar feed. The feed showed them closing the distance. 100 meters, 50 meters. The colossal shape was still there, inert. At 30 meters, the lead operator gave the command to activate the strobes and main camera. What happened next was recorded on the EUV's internal logs and in the panicked shouts of the bridge crew. The instant the strobes fired, bathing the abyss in a split second of artificial daylight, the object on the sonar screen moved. It did not stir or shift, it reacted. The sonar registered a massive, instantaneous displacement of water. The segmented appendages, each one the size of a telephone pole, unfurled in a violent, synchronized motion. The creature, in a single, explosive act of propulsion, launched itself from the trench floor. The EV's sensors went haywire. The pressure wave was so intense it sent Hound 2 into an uncontrollable spin. The sonar screen dissolved into a blinding white chaos of turbulence and cavitation, the acoustic equivalent of a flashbang grenade. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Before any operator could react, the chaos on the screen cleared for a fraction of a second. The monolithic contact was no longer on the bottom. It was now above the UVs, moving at a speed the software flagged as an error. It registered an instantaneous acceleration from 0 to over 40 knots, nearly 50 miles per hour. No known biological organism of that mass can achieve such acceleration. It was the kinematic profile of a torpedo, not an animal. Then it was gone. The contact vanished from all three sonar screens simultaneously. It didn't swim out of range. It simply ceased to be there, as if it had been erased from existence. All that remained was a swirling column of disturbed water and the terrified, echoing silence in the control room. The Cambrian Institute immediately locked down the entire project. The crew was debriefed, forced to sign draconian non-disclosure agreements, and the street. Columba left the lock under the cover of darkness. The official story was that the geological survey was complete and had found nothing of note. But someone, believed to be the young technician Evan Ross, had made a copy of that first, terrifyingly clear sonar scan. A single image, leaked onto the dark web, began to circulate among a small community of cryptozoologists and anomaly researchers. It was dismissed by the mainstream as just another sophisticated hoax, but those who had seen the raw data from Operation Deep Scan, those who knew what modern SAS was capable of, were not so sure. This brings us to the theories, now viewed through the lens of this terrifying new potential evidence. The plesiosaur theory seems almost quaint. While abyssal gigantism could explain the size, the biomechanics of a reptile's neck and flippers could never account for the impossible speed and acceleration. The Loch survey's giant eel is now laughable, a pathetic attempt to fit an immense and complex reality into a small, convenient box. A new, more unsettling hypothesis has emerged, one that draws on the fossil record of the Cambrian explosion over 500 million years ago. This was a time when life experimented with bizarre and alien body plans, creating creatures like the Anomalocris, a formidable predator with grasping frontal appendages and an unfamiliar physiology. Could the Loch Ness creature be a lone survivor of this era, an apex predator from a time before vertebrates even dominated the seas? A creature whose biology is so fundamentally different from ours that it operates on principles we cannot yet comprehend? The segmented body, the articulated limbs, it fits this far better than it fits a reptile or a fish. It suggests we are not dealing with a missing link from the age of dinosaurs, but a relic from the dawn of complex life itself, a living fossil of almost unimaginable antiquity. But there is another theory, one whispered by the most shaken members of the Leviathan crew. It focuses on the object's reaction, the impossible acceleration, the way it vanished from 3 separate sonar screens at once. This was not the behavior of a frightened animal. It was the behavior of something employing a technology. The strobing lights of the EUV did not scare it. They may have triggered a defensive or cloaking system. This theory posits that the object in the loch is not an animal at all, it is a vehicle. A submersible of unknown origin and design that uses the deep, dark, and acoustically messy loch as a hiding place or a base of operations. This would explain its ability to evade sonar for decades and the impossible kinematics. It would mean the legend of the Loch Ness Monster has been a multi-century misidentification, a cargo cult of biology centered around a phenomenon that is not biological in the slightest. The Cambrian Institute remains silent. Official channels in the UK and Scottish governments deny any knowledge of Operation Leviathan or its findings. The leaked sonar image is scrubbed from the internet as quickly as it appears. The world moves on, content with the story of the giant eel. But on the shores of Loch Ness, something has changed. The old-timers, the gillies and fishermen who know the water's every move, report that the loch is different now. The sonar on their own fishing boats is acting strangely, particularly over the deep trench of Urquhart Castle. They show readings that are glitchy, with momentary false bottoms that appear and disappear. The water, they say, feels colder, darker. The local tour boat captains, a jovial and skeptical bunch by trade, have quietly altered their routes, keeping to the shallower southern basin, avoiding the deep northern waters without explaining why. A new, unspoken fear has settled over the great glen, a fear far more profound than the one inspired by a mythical monster. The most disturbing rumor, the one that chills the blood, comes from a supposedly secondary analysis of the final data from the hounds, leaked from a source deep within the Institute. The sonar scans taken after the object vanished showed more than just turbulent water. When the sediment settled and the technicians recalibrated the imaging software to its maximum sensitivity, they looked again at the ethelred abyss, the trench where the entity had been resting. The scans showed that the bottom of the trench was no longer solid rock. Where the creature had lain, the ultra-high-resolution sonar now depicted a perfect circle of absolute, featureless black. It was not a shadow, it was an absence of data. The powerful sonar signals were being sent down into it, but nothing was coming back. It was as if something had been opened. The geological floor of the loch, in that one specific spot was gone. The mystery is no longer what lies within the waters of Loch Ness. The new, terrifying question is, how deep does it go?